We welcome you all to a Roll to Cast RPG podcast in the world of Starfinder by Paizo Incorporated. Starring Ellen Graham as Ada Prime, Christopher Bond as Zahak, Phil Harker-Smith as Clink, and Karma Duffield as Pinch. Story, GMing, and additional rules by Sean Fleur. Designed by Jack Sumner. Music by Paul Goodman. This is Among the Dust. Welcome everybody to Roll to Cast, a weekly TTRPG podcast filled with trained actors, original stories, original music, where we explore a different TTRPG game every season. It is Season 8 Starfinder time!
Woo! Pew, pew,
hooray.
pew, pew. Oh no, the lasers are out.
For those, the uninitiated, my name is Sean, and I am joined by...
I'm Ellen.
I am Phil.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Karma.
Joining the very exclusive club of guest performers here on Roll to Cast.
That's right. There's only been 3 prior,
so we have a Karma, a singular Karma.
Just one.
Who has joined the fray and is going to be our fourth player here on this here podcast.
Yes. Excellent.
Very excited to have him.
This is an interesting moment for myself because this is exactly 2 years to the possible podcast date that episode 0 for Ambrosia Island hit.
All right.
Wow.
But exactly 2 years since...
I love how you said possible podcast dates.
Yes, because when this drops, here you go, here's my thinking. When this drops, it'll be the 20th. I think. No, the 18th. And Ambrosia Island was on the 20th. So it's
That's about as close as you
yeah,
get.
it's as close as you can get.
Yeah.
As close as you can get. Yeah.
I just love the addendum of probably.
Any day could be the
Maybe.
2-year anniversary.
Just so someone doesn't go, it's actually a different date.
I'd love that if our fans got in the Discord and were like, no, Sean, you're wrong.
If our fans want to keep track of our personal calendars, that would be absolutely fine by
Personal
me.
movements and...
Sure.
That's right.
Yeah.
What's that drone doing? Why is it following us? We did say they should start a wiki about all our season and characters.
Yes, there has
Ooh.
been discussion about a wiki for all the characters that have come before. But what are we doing now, Sean? Because I saw a star, I looked at it, and it hurt my eyes.
You did. Well,
I went outside,
Was it
Ellen.
the sun?
Yes.
well, there are 2 things that I can reveal. First of all, to our listeners, which is going to be where you can find us and where we are, because we'll see what happens in Twitter land. But as Chris, you've alluded to, we have a Discord. So we have the Roll to Cast, ROLE Discord. You can find the link in the show notes of this here very podcast or whatever podcatcher you're using. We have an Instagram, Roll to Cast. We maybe have a Twitter.
Who knows?
We'll see. But if you want to keep up to date, if you want to be talking with like-minded individuals on anything TTRPG, pop culture, or just a picture of your dog, then jump on, and we're on there as well, and we chat, and you can find out things regularly, such as what game we're playing early.
And if you are a patron on that Discord,
Yes.
you can find out all sorts of little secrets before they're announced to the public. So get in there.
But more to the point, Chris, you bring up a good point. We are playing Starfinder, and the first thing I'll reveal to everyone is the campaign name. If you've clicked onto this,
Starfinder, I barely know it.
you know it. You know it if you've clicked, but my 4 players do not.
We do not.
It is called Starfinder Among the Dust.
Ooh, that's nice.
I like that a lot.
Among Us.
Among Us.
That game.
That's pretty
Oh,
sus,
no.
Sean.
Someone's going to get...
Someone's sus.
Someone's
done that on
Among
purpose.
the Dust. I love it.
I
so good.
came up with it, and I was very proud of
Yeah,
myself.
it's a good
You should
freaking
be.
title.
It's
a
And
good title.
I
Love it.
googled it. I don't think it exists, so I'm the first.
Woo!
Um,
The first
yes.
to string those 3 words together.
So I'll have a bit of a talk about how this game came to pass, because it was actually about 2 years ago. I'm obsessed with the world of Starfinder. I was brought into it by listening to a podcast called Androids and Aliens, which is done by the Glass Cannon podcast, and I just became infatuated and obsessed with Starfinder, the world, and it kind of fits my usual adherence to games that are clunky and are well beyond my usual reach.
Ah, the Sean Fleur special.
Yes.
Always reaching.
And Chris, actually,
Yes.
for Christmas, gave
Christmas?
me Christmas.
Your birthday, I thought.
Was it my birthday?
Yeah, it was your
Oh,
birthday.
birthday. Got
Yeah.
me the core rulebook.
Yes.
Basically, it was like, run it, do it,
Do it. Have
You
fun.
want to do it?
You'll enjoy
Do it.
Go on.
So 2 years later,
That's how
2
long
years
it took
later.
him to learn the game.
Yeah.
yeah, and even then we'll see. But yeah, so I thought, you know what, like I've been given a gift and I should play it. And I've been wanting to play it for the longest time. And since Ambrosia Island, I've now, it's funny, I was listening to Ambrosia Island in episode 0 where I said, the only thing I've DM'd so far is a one-shot for Phil in a D&D campaign. And that's all I'd done at that point. So 2 years since, I've run an entire D&D campaign. I've got a casual Starfinder group now as well, where we
Who
played...
are they?
I know. We played one session of Starfinder. And so
And it
now...
meant nothing to you, right?
No, never.
Okay. Phew.
Why would it? And so this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be playing Starfinder basically for the first time. So what I'll do first off is we'll just quickly go around the table and we're just going to say who you're playing, just a name and the race. And actually, let's go with the class as well. Why not?
Yep.
So race, class, and your character's name, just as a bit of a
where we're
introduction.
from, or
You know what? Yeah,
where we're from?
have a bit of
Yeah.
like a little bit of a brief so we can introduce people, and then we'll go into the world itself and influence.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
So teeny brief.
yeah.
just
Yeah.
the basics.
Just a little bite.
Yeah.
So I'll start with same round the table. Let's start with our dear Ellen.
Hello, well, I'm Ellen, and I will be playing Arda Prime, who is an android technomancer from Absalom Station.
Excellent.
Yes.
Phil.
I am playing Clivic or Clink. He is a Shirin. Shirin love the nicknames that they get given by other races because they're very communal. I'm a mechanic. And I have a friend. One of the options is you either get a little AI or a bot. I went for the bot because it's really cool.
Because of course.
Yes.
Yes.
Because it's cool.
And his name is Dex.
Aw.
Yes. Clink is also from Absalom Station, grew up on the Spike, and spent a lot of time in bot scrap.
And just
Very nice.
for those who are unfamiliar with Starfinder, what in the world is a Shirin?
A Shirin is an insect race. Well, the Shirin are an insect race. They
Bug boy.
are a bug boy, yeah. So they originally were from a giant ravenous swarm that the Pact Worlds fought off at one point. But they mutated away from the swarm to have their own individuality and free will, which they're now addicted to.
Hey.
Yep.
Addicted to
Can't
free
get
will.
enough of that
Yeah, they're-
pesky free will.
They're addicted to choice itself.
Free
you go.
base and choice.
They're also telepathic because their mandibles can't make comprehensible sounds.
I was going to say, can Shirins talk? Can they as well?
They can make insect noises.
Great.
I'm sure they understand each other, but
Yes.
no one else would.
Yeah, this might be. I might ask a further question about that telepathy later on. 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm interested if it's a full two-way street or whether it's just like I can't use words, so now I beam words directly into your brain, or is it fully two-way?
So Phil can thought speak to you.
Yes, excellent.
It's
but
Animorph
you
style.
cannot thought speak to him.
Ah,
Animorph style.
Yeah.
I have to use my ears to
Your
listen.
bug
Which you do have.
I have ears and antennae.
Ooh.
Show off.
Mr. Chris.
Hello. Yes. Okay. My character is named Zahak Inanna Deva of Clan Merdic, House Sharma Sherman, Ravna of the line of Ellis. He's a Kasatha.
But friends call him.
Yeah.
Zach.
Great.
I love a giant name with a tiny nickname.
Or
It's
Zahak-
so good.
Zahak is just the first name.
Zahak.
He's
Zahak
a mystic.
was
He's
that,
a mystic. So very similar to your classic Dungeons and Dragons style. He's a priest. He's a cleric. He has a faith. And he has his cleric spells and powers. And as a Kasatha, he's got a big brain.
Yeah.
He's got a long head and
fit
4
brain.
arms.
Yeah.
And he's grey and very tall.
He's grey?
He's
grey.
He's a
Oh, okay.
smart,
Yeah.
lithe
In
Goro.
colour. He's a what?
Yes, he is. Exactly that, actually.
Yeah.
I did not get that
Yes.
And
reference.
Neither did I.
That's
It's
Mortal
good to be on
Kombat.
Mortal
Kombat.
I like
right
Ellen
over
being
my
on
head.
the other side of obscure references.
Oh no.
I'm right there with you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Where's-
Solidarity.
Where's Zach from?
He is from a ship, the Idari.
Yeah.
And so his race of people, they were orbiting a dying star. they're like, oh no, we're super advanced. Let's get on a ship called the Adari and let's go to this planet that's uninhabited, and we'll get there. And when we get there, we can populate that planet because we're foretold to go there by like mystics and whatever. And then when they got there, they discovered that a whole bunch of other aliens had got there first.
Oopsie.
and they had kind of fallen into a kind of technological not regression, but like stagnation while on the ship. Because everything was kind of catered to them, and
the other planet had obviously technologically advanced. So by the time they got there,
They were no longer advanced.
Are you saying that they lived through like the second part of Wall-E?
Yes.
Yeah.
To a degree,
Excellent.
They
yeah.
came back and were like, we're going to be the best. Oh.
Uh-oh.
But so they decided to just stay in their ship.
they're
Didn't
they're just in orbit now.
yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nothing
I
wrong
believe
with staying in your ship. you
They
know?
are petitioning to be part of the Pact Worlds, but they haven't been let in yet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it was
right.
like a little compromise.
Yeah.
Of like,
yeah.
You can orbit us, but don't come down here.
Yeah, we're going to classify your ship as a world.
They can
Sort of.
enjoy some of the perks of like being a Pact World protectorate, but I don't think they're strictly a member of the
Yeah,
Pact
we have
Worlds.
we have Pact World Protectorate privileges.
Yes.
I wonder how the plosives are going to feel in the edit there.
Say that 5 times
Yeah,
fast.
oh, thanks. But yeah, no. So he's a cleric boy with a big head and a long name.
Great.
Excellent.
And
Long head.
Long head,
Long
long name.
Zahak.
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 Or Zach.
Or Zach.
If people really must. But
Zack Attack.
that's not correct.
And Karma. Let's hear a little bit about your character.
Hello. So my character is technically is named Nick Nick.
Nick.
But he's only known as Pinch. Only his mother calls him Nick Nick, and she's dead. So,
Oh.
but he is a Yosoki, so essentially a humanoid rat standing at about 3.5 feet tall. So regular rat size.
What?
In
New
Australia.
York. Yeah.
Yeah.
In New York.
But he is an operative, so he's a rogue type. He's very sneaky. He's a attacky boy.
Sneaky,
And
attacky.
An attacky boy or a tacky boy? Like he just sticks to everything.
or he has bad taste.
A sticky rat.
Terrible textured rat.
Garish. Yeah. Also
Awful.
that.
Do not touch this rat. One star.
And he is from Akaton, which is
Ooh.
basically a desolate desert planet with all sorts of radiation and crime running rampant through it.
How good.
So New York.
It's yeah, that's right. It's like a
Sorry,
it's like
New
a fantasy Mars. I think about it because it's like one past the missing Earth-like planet, and it's red.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's mostly desert. It's got ice caps, but then it's just desert everywhere else. There's pretty much no law.
Yeah.
The government has essentially crumbled, and it's mostly pseudo run by mobs and things like that.
Acton was also one of the most prolific planets in the Pact World, in that they used to be responsible for a lot of the petroleum the
Yes.
energy that was used
They
for
had
starships.
huge mines
Yeah.
that are still technically running, but now leaking radiation. So
Yeah.
And then once drift travel, so Starfinder's version of hyperspace, basically was invented, then their petroleum deposits pretty much came obsolete. And they're like, well, we're no longer one of the kind of the big boys of the
there's
Pact
no need
Worlds.
for fuel anymore. So
Yeah.
Pack
everyone-
'em up, boys.
Pretty much.
The site's closed.
And
They
I-
all talk like this, see?
And I think the important thing as well is in terms of the androids, as androids have a big part of their lore as well. Do you want to talk about a bit of the android lore that we know about?
Oh, as in, so
Just androids in general, yeah.
androids are a kind of, they're humanoid, obviously. They are not cyborgs. They're their own race of kind of a mixture of nanites and also a kind of organic system that allows them to live. And they have been created, a lot of their lore has been kind of lost to time. There's a lot of speculation of where the first android came from, but mainly they were known as cheap labor created in creches, and essentially a slave race for a time, until there was an android uprising. And now we live in a world where, or we live in many worlds rather, where the androids have been granted full citizenship of the Pact World. So they have gained their own independence, are now exploring lives, outside of servitude. There are obviously still illegal, operations of people, building androids for labor, but that's illegal stuff's going to happen everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah. A lot of things have been thrown around terms and that, and I'll get into that in a moment. But in terms of these 4 characters in this campaign or adventure path, as it were, is that the 4 of you are a part of a crew together, a crew that work together, live together, and may die together, but hopefully not.
Could happen.
But you are a crew reminiscent of one of my favorite bits of media, Firefly. Is that you are a crew that's kind of working job to job and just trying to make ends meet, keep yourself flying. You are strange bedfellows, and you've found yourself, for better or for worse, working together on one ship. And that ship, I'm going to leave to Phil. Talk about what the ship is, what it's called, and why am I deferring to you to talk about it?
Because Clink built the ship. Clink built and operates this ship with his crew. It is called the No Wrong Answers, a little reference to his love of choice. The idea behind him having this ship and building this ship is that he grew up on very poor in the Spike, which is the very poor part of Absalom Station.
The lower class sector of Absalom Station, yeah.
And the thing about being poor is it narrows your choices. So the way he thought that he could, get more choice in his life was to make his own ship. So he has cobbled this ship together from pieces in bot scrap until it is worthy of a trading license and space worthy. Sort of his baby, his creation, and it's got that kind of, it's got the scrappiness of a small crew doing small jobs. You have to bang things to stop them humming, and bits are cribbed off other starships.
How
and
is that
sort of
thing flying?
Yeah, it has that kind of wing and a prayer kind of idea to it. So yeah, that's the No Wrong Answers. It is a Cavallari Collective venture. So the Cavallari Collective make just a lot of very mass-produced ships.
Yes.
And this one is one of their kind of base models, but it's been kind of heavily modified over the years.
So I'll give a quick primer to those who are unfamiliar with Starfinder, just in the world that we find ourselves in, because we've thrown around terms like the names of the races, packed worlds, and a couple of planets, and so you might be a little bit unfamiliar on how to contextualize a lot of that. So the main conceit and the main kind of driving force behind Starfinders is that, so this world, as you might gather, is a continuation of Pathfinder. Pathfinder is very simply a fantasy alternative to D&D, and so Starfinder sits in the same universe but millennia into the future. The way they work around that is there was this event called the Gap. And the Gap was an event itself that stretched a few millennia. They're actually unsure on the length of time, but it is a time in history within the whole universe where no one remembers anything. Years since then are known as AG. So instead of BC and AD, it's AG, meaning after the Gap. So 0 AG was a moment that all collective consciousness woke up, became aware that they were existing, and that they had been this entire time. So for all intents and purposes, they had been living before that, but essentially minds had been completely wiped. They were aware of their names. They knew how to do things like, brush their space teeth, and how to talk, and their languages
Mandibles.
and everything such as that. But they had no knowledge of anything other than that. They might know, oh, this is my partner. I can't remember how we met or anything, but I know that we are together. Our photographs are blurred. History books are vague, if not completely erased.
And sometimes they change between checking them.
Yes. And it's this instance where they go to the gods because gods exist. Magic exists. Technology exists. All in harmony together. They go to the gods and they say, yo, what gives? Why don't we remember anything? And the gods go,
If they know, they're not saying.
Exactly.
Yes.
One of the other things that became very apparent very quickly is that something was missing. And that something was Galarian. Now, Galarian was the central planet within what was known then as the Galarian system, which will be known as the Pact Worlds later. But Galarian was the setting for Pathfinder. And that planet was just gone. An entire planet erased. And in its place was what would become the central hub of the Pact Worlds, known as Absalom Station. Think the Citadel from Mass Effect. Again, this is something that the gods are not saying anything about. They're saying, Galarian, be safe. Galarian, be existent. But Galarian, not for you anymore.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you didn't subscribe to the Galarian
DLC.
DLC.
They have explicitly said that it is safe and it exists.
Yes.
It's
But
just been moved to Space Plus.
Yeah.
It's just gone
Space
to
Race.
the space paddock to
Yeah.
Where
Grace.
planets run around happy and free.
Adopted by a lesbian couple who love it very much.
From a meta perspective, this allows Paizo and the writers to basically do whatever they like with both Starfinder and Pathfinder and not have it cross. They don't necessarily have to explain it. And heretofore and since, the reason behind the gap has not been explained. It is there for anyone to figure out. Spoiler, we're not going to be figuring it out
Yeah.
this season.
Let's crack
A
it
bit
together.
above our pay grade.
Let's crack the central mystery
Yes.
of the entire setting.
It's a bit above my pay grade. The other thing is we have a thing called the Pact Worlds. So everyone within the Galarian system, once drift travel was established, which was the hyperspace hyperdrive functioning for their ships, they came into contact with another race from the Vast, which was called the Veskarium. Lizard folk, lizard people. War ensued for a very, very, very long time. And eventually they decided, no, the Swarm came in. That's when the Pact
Yeah.
World, So they fight for 200 years.
Veskarium was first. Swarm came later.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
Vesk and the Pact Worlds fight for 200 years, and then the Swarm comes in, which is not unlike the Swarm from the Halo series, basically. And they finally have a mutual enemy, realize they should probably work together, sign a treaty that fits as like a way to have mutual defense, to work together both from a social and political and cultural standpoint, and slowly following suit with all the other planets within the Pact Worlds. And this is kind of the world in which we find ourselves.
It's one solar system with about 8 or 9 planets.
Yeah.
All of them have some kind of their own kind of
Quirk.
culture or quirk. Most are inhabited in some way, or at least their moons are. So there's like, even just in this one solar system, there's loads of cool locations.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's many places to explore. Literally, Starfinder.
Woo.
It's
Yeah.
about adventure. It is
Find
about going and finding the stars.
I'm going to
And-
be Ash Ketchum, finding all the
Gonna
stars.
catch them all.
Put him in a box.
Yeah.
I
and
feel
that's,
like-
that's just the one solar system. So there's a ton of mysteries just in the one solar system.
There's near space and there's the vast.
and then you can keep going
Yes.
to other places as well. So there's loads of stuff to explore. I love it.
we'll
Thank
go
God
to
for
every planet. No.
Yeah.
Or thank Triune, rather, for faster than light travel. That's really helped things
You
out.
did
Handy.
us a good one, did us a
Yeah.
solid. So I've talked for long enough, and I thought as we do each episode 0, just chat about a little bit about the influences that we have or the media that we enjoy when it comes to tackling something like Starfinder. We haven't done, now I can say it, heretofore we have not done a space sci-fi season. We have tackled sci-fi in form with Cyberpunk. This is the first time we've jumped to the skies, and I know for myself this is a huge part of what I like and what I enjoy about pop culture and media itself, but I'm keen to hear from all of you. Let's jump around the same way. Elon.
Oh, that was dangerously close to Elon there.
Musk.
I didn't like that. Did not like that. Everyone knows the worst thing you can say to me is call me Elon Musk. It's the worst
I coined
thing.
it.
I guess I like a lot of sci-fi things, but I'm pretty narrow to the forms of media I've engaged with, mainly because sci-fi tends to be, not always, but a lot of sci-fi out there is very long running, and I'm low on time. Obviously, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I love any kind of space rebellion or, exploring the skies. I really, really love Mass Effect. And I think that was one of the things that, I wanted to draw on for Starfinder, this idea of Mass Effect and Firefly both being this idea of you're on this ship together and the people who you fly with and work with, it just becomes your family, essentially. You have this kind of camaraderie and it's just essentially a lot of parallels to seafaring life or that kind of thing where any kind of vocation or lifestyle where you spend your days traveling, it really, really always becomes about found family. And I think that's what was really my central hook
Yeah.
for this kind of Starfinder story. So yeah,
And you also have written a play about the stars and in space as well.
Oh yeah. It's it won't be. It still won't be out by the time this podcast comes out. It'll be hitting the stages 2024. It's
In the future.
yeah. So that play that I wrote was about a world where you can't see the stars anymore. They're privatized, and so very drawn to
Quite
this.
literally trying to find them.
Literally, essentially. And so that play as well has got all my favorites kind of sci-fi things in it. A rebellion, a bit of space, esoteric kind of religion, folksy, poetic kind of thinking. So yeah, check me out for that. But yeah, mainly for me, it's always about a human story. It's all about what's out there. That's my kind of central tenet. What else could be out there?
Phil.
I love sci-fi. I'm a big sci-fi guy. My usual kind of take on sci-fi, particularly space sci-fi, is what you would call hard sci-fi. So as opposed to something like a space opera, Star Wars, you'd probably call it space opera.
Yeah.
It's something that doesn't rely on physics too hard and has kind of magical elements like the Force and stuff like that. I tend to gravitate to things like The Expanse, Elite Dangerous, the Culture novels, which are by Ian M. Banks, which is like about a post-scarcity society, which is kind of inspires the name of the ship as well. So that's my usual kind of take is like a very, very realistic take on sci-fi.
The science in science fiction.
The science in science fiction. I really love the science in science fiction. So this is a little bit of a departure for me about how much it blends magic and technology. And I have actually gone for a very technology-based character. But having said that, I'm really attracted to the way they have blended science and tech in this. I mean, the other one I can think of that does it is the cyberpunk setting for D&D. What's it called?
Spelljammer?
No. It's got the Warforged in it. As a
Cold Brain, come on. Everyone's shouting at the
Not us.
podcast.
I'll think of it and I'll
Head
yell it out
empty.
at some point.
It's
I've
a
played a few.
cyberpunk game with D&D. It's got orcs and everything.
Oh, you mean
Everyone, come on!
Shadowrun?
Shadowrun!
Oh, that's what you were saying.
Sorry, I was still, no, okay, yeah, I get you. I get
Sorry,
you.
Phil.
Thank you.
None of us helped you there.
I got there in the end.
Shadowrun. I think this works better than Shadowrun in terms of the way it's blended science and technology. I think one of the reasons for that is the scope is much larger. It's a whole galaxy, and so you can have pure science, pure magic, bit of a mix, and it can all coexist in different places. And I just particularly like the imagination displayed in this world, like just within the packed worlds and the basic races. You've got, communal-minded telepathic insects. You've got communal jellyfish that live in a gas giant and can merge their brains when they need to tackle bigger problems.
Bretheta.
Bretheta, yeah. You've got
It's bruschetta, actually.
You've got a world that was so angry that they built a super weapon that blew up their own planet and torched their own atmosphere. And their way out of that situation was to become necromancers and revive their dead population. Eox.
Yeah.
I just think there's a lot of really cool imagination on display, and it means that you can kind of go anywhere and tell whatever story you want. And I really like that. And there are classes specifically like the Technomancer that really explore that delineated line between magic and tech. And the other thing I like about the kind of fantasy worlds that this is based on is the reality of the gods. I really like that one. It's just gods aren't kind of abstract concepts. They're there. They exist.
They're real.
You can
They're
chat
real.
to them sometimes.
You can chat. They give you divine powers if they like you.
They
They're
give
not
you
abstract.
tech. They give you cool things.
They're a concept.
Yeah.
They're a practical concept.
Yeah.
They're a being.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
The
there are
dudes.
even mortals
They're just down the street.
who have ascended to
Hello.
Godhead as
Yeah.
well. So I really like that as well. It gives a kind of interesting dimension to the roleplay and to the world and the stories you can tell. Oh, and the other thing I think is very cool about the Pact Worlds is there's just a Cthulhu planet It's just an egg.
Don't go there.
It's just an egg that will one day probably maybe hatch into an old one. It's just
That's
floating there.
Octone, isn't it?
Octone.
Yeah.
The stranger. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So they've got a bit of everything, and I
Yeah.
think it's blended really well. So that's why I'm excited.
If you can't tell, Phil like the sci-fi.
It's
Yeah,
almost like
yeah.
there's no wrong answers in
Oh.
stuff.
Speaking of no wrong answers, Chris,
Oh, what an interesting segue.
you're always
So-
right.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
I don't know about that one. I love sci-fi for ostensibly the opposite reasons Phil does. I think Phil approaches, and we've talked about this in previous podcasts, Phil looks at sci-fi and sees like boundless opportunity as like, post-scarcity is something that you often talk about as like Star Trek and that sort of idea. I go the complete opposite. I love to see how human beings can be messed up and disgusting and awful to each other in new and exciting and different ways. And I love sci-fi as a way to do that. So some of my favorite like science fiction is Alien and Aliens. That whole thing
Yes.
happens because of a breakdown of capitalism, right? It's like, it's consumerism. It's this, we're going to put profit above people, and it doesn't matter what the actual reason is. It's about the need to consume. Predator, again, a perfect allegory. Then we have things like Battlestar Galactica. The threat is not the outside that's coming at them, but the internal who's the enemy. So that's the real threat is who can you trust? You've got all this scientific knowledge and all of the you're flying in space, and isn't that cool? But realistically, it's how you relate to other people. It's Warhammer 40K. In the deep reaches of time, humanity has declined and is at threat. It's only war. It's StarCraft, human beings betraying each other so that alien species take over each other, so that human beings can try and take advantage of that takeover to exploit each other. It's all of that sort of stuff. That's what really gets me jazzed about it. It doesn't matter how far into the future we go, doesn't matter how much we technologically evolve, unless we solve the interpersonal problems or our inside narrative, we're always going to harm each other. What's the great film? It's not a great film, but it's a really excellent. Up is great.
It is a good film.
It's
WALL-E.
the one where they go to Event Horizon.
Oh,
Event
yeah.
Horizon is
Cathedral
another.
ship.
Yeah, that to me is like great sci-fi. Love, Death and Robots on Netflix. While is hit and miss like nobody's business, when it hits it and it hits right for me, it is about the interhumanity of each character, and rather than technology taking the focus, technology reflecting the humanity that each human being has. One of my favorite stories in that is, I can't remember the name of it, but it's and Carmen, you and I watched it together, the one with the blue, what's it called? It's like Delta Blue or something like that.
Yeah, I can't help you. I've seen the animation. It's cool.
It's really great.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
An artist becomes
Yeah.
like really prolific and is actually has always just been a little...
It's like a pool cleaner.
It's a pool cleaner that has evolved
pool
over
cleaning
time.
robot.
That has evolved over time and built a consciousness into itself that becomes an artist.
Oh, right.
And then
Okay.
at the end of the story, spoilers for those who haven't seen it, rejects its own humanity and just goes, I want to be a cool pool cleaner again. I want to lose everything. And
Let me
return.
scrub tile.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let
Yeah.
me return to my base needs, which is just really freaking cool. So that to me is space is terrifying. Space is humanity reflected back at itself. The if you stare into the void, this void stares back into you. That's space for me. It's a dark, scary place, and when you're alone on a ship, the only people that you've got are yourselves, and that is sometimes not a good thing.
Hey.
That's so funny because I think, again, Chris and I are like diametrically opposed in that we love the same stuff, but we are at like yours is space is endless and that's scary, and I'm space is endless and that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Two sides, eh?
Come on.
Yeah, I think interestingly, I probably have a foot in both camps in as far as that goes. Because I love sci-fi, but I love it for kind of opposing reasons in different ways, and I can kind of lean either way with it. Like, I do love the idea that humanity as long as we go on, we're still just going to make the same problems, just in weirder ways, more intent, more bigger ways, like more, far-reaching ways. We'll do it on Earth and then we'll do it wherever else we end up. But at the same time, I love just like the wackiness of a silly space opera-y, weird aliens, like ridiculous cultural norms of other species and stuff like that. So similarly, things like Love, Death and Robots, and then, Warhammer and things like that, where it's just, here's the intense psychological side of things. But at the same time, I love you've got things like The Orville, where it's just comedy based.
Yeah.
And of course, my intense love, Animorphs, where you've got kind of both as well. You've got ridiculous shit happening, but then you've also got, just like the trauma and the seriousness of the situation and the idea that you're having to save entire species and make like planet altering decisions and things like that. So I think both interest me in different ways, and I do really like that this game has all of those options and everything in between. It is kind of like Phil said, there's a Cthulhu planet. There's so much. There's everything you could possibly want. You can lean in either direction. And I think I chose a similar thing where I went quite reality based in terms of like not getting into the magic side of things very much and sticking to like the tech and the guns and things like that. But at the same time, it can still be ridiculously wacky. I'm a talking rat who can put his entire gun in his mouth. Like, that's silly, and I love it. So
and he will.
He will.
It really unlocks the imagination, doesn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I need to put all that into one adventure. Great.
Easy peasy.
Everyone.
No pressure. And it's kind of fascinating because obviously I can relate to a lot of those being talked about at the table, but similarly to how I approached Pulp Cthulhu and the action adventure realm, that's exactly what I love about sci-fi as well, is that at its like core and honestly at its most popcorny, it's just fucking go out and have an adventure in space. Why the fuck not? And it's pure escapism in a lot of ways as well, because you can come at sci-fi from like two, like, I'm being very rigid, but two like distinct angles. Like it's either going to be like, we want to make you think about these social political themes and see how it's an allegory for what's happening today. Like think about it. And that's great. Or it's, just shut your fucking brain off for 2 hours and just think about like rats in space. And that's like awesome. And often it's a blending of the two, but I just love that ability just to be able to like escape into a universe that'll never come to pass, at least not in my lifetime.
It's the Guardians of the Galaxy balance, isn't it?
Exactly that. Like, and that's been a big influence for me as well in terms of tonal balance, and how to like, because for me as well, you can have, to me, a lot of the fun and the playfulness that comes from those sci-fi adventures is how you relate to the characters and how you get emotionally invested. Then throw those characters in something that's a little bit more stakes heavy or a little bit just heavier in general, and that's where like I think it really kind of just simmers and brews into a nice sci-fi pot. For myself, Star Trek is a big one from the video game aspect. Mass Effect is a humongous influence for myself, and it's tattooed on my body. So Firefly is another one. For me, it's about finding relatable characters that I want to see go on big, huge adventures and hopefully not die. And that's what gets me jazzed, is the ability to tell a story where people could just escape into a world for a couple of hours and feel like they're being drawn along with it, and just to go, imagine if that was me. Imagine if that was me on a spaceship in space, or being faced with a Cthulhu monster, or I'm obsessed with like using rat people as an analogy now. Facing rat people.
They're called Italians, all right?
Exploring.
I can say that.
Or like exploring an ancient vault,
Yeah.
like from a lost civilization, that's got some kind of like terrible virus or transcendental tech. It could be anything, right?
That's it. And it's so funny how you can make what would seem like such astronomical stakes in a more grounded story can just be a Tuesday in sci-fi land, right? Like a world-eating virus. Oh, we did that last week again.
Well, I was just about to say, speaking of last week, the thing that you and I have been doing, Sean, for the longest time in this podcast was Futurama.
Yeah.
Which is
Big
what we have
sci-fi.
talked about, but is one of the most kind of popcorny, monster of the weeky low stakes, even high stakes, but kind of low consequences.
Yeah.
The planet got overtook by brains, but whatever.
Yeah, it's
Exactly
stress.
right.
It's
But
the
tomorrow
sitcom
we'll go
of
to work
returning,
and-
returning to the status
Go on,
quo.
deliver a package to Ebola 5.
Yeah.
The virus planet.
Yeah.
And that in itself has a really nice blend between the funny and the absurd and just really hard hitting stakes sometimes.
I like what you said, Phil, about really unlocking the imagination, because it's true. Once you head to a setting that's not known to us, a fantasy setting, go out and meet in a tavern or go out into the forest, have an adventure. We kind of know those things. We know forests, we know taverns, and because it's kind of a loose medieval setting, sometimes people get really hardwired in the, what's hard fantasy, what's soft fantasy, and you get the things of like, oh, I like Game of Thrones, but why they have dragons or what, like that kind of thing where it's like, just accept it all, man. But, when you get so far removed that it is like, oh yeah, a planet just full of brains. You step everywhere, there's a brain. Like you can just completely take away that sense of, oh, well, how does it work like that? Or the physics of that planet?
Don't worry about it.
Accept the adventure. Accept it. Go with it.
Yeah.
Everything is possible.
I like the point that, that the sci-fi that a lot of us like is character driven. And when you play a tabletop RPG, the central thing is your characters, right? That's what bonds you together as a play group. And that's what drives the story forward. And so that's great for telling this kind of swashbuckling adventure is focusing on the characters and putting them somewhere interesting.
And what's going to be interesting about how we tackle Starfinder and how anyone tackles Starfinder is, as we've mentioned, there is kind of endless customization in terms of the kind of story you want to tell, which for some people can be frustrating, for some people can be really liberating. It depends on the kind of games you like and what you enjoy and how you like to tackle it. But it does mean that, as we've stated, you can literally have an eldritch adventure if you want to, or you can have like a Firefly mission to mission sort of adventure, and both work within the scope of, and that's why
political intrigue.
And that's the purpose of games like Starfinder and D&D, is that they're deliberately designed to have more of that clean slate that you can impose your story and your wants and needs onto it. It does make like my job more. It took me so, like, I will say right now, and I'll talk about this in the postseason more, but it took me a long time to figure out where I was going to head with this story. And once I cracked it, it was like all the gooiness just came out. But like trying to crack that egg was such a difficult task.
Oh, not the stranger egg.
I'm so glad you cracked an egg. We are ready to feast on the gooey insides.
Please
Sean.
do.
I'm ready.
Look
I
it
like
up.
mine scrambled.
Yum.
I was imagining a Cadbury's cream egg, but that's okay.
Same.
I like them scrambled too.
In terms of the story itself, I don't really want to give too much away, but there are a few things that we kind of need to set up as a bit of a primer for those of you coming into the season. First of all, as we've established, the four of you are a working, living crew, potentially with ideological and personality differences, but it works. I would say that you have been working together for at least a year. Like you are knowledgeable with each other. For those playing along, we're starting at level 3. So these are level 3 characters, just so that they have a little bit of experience behind them from a narrative perspective. These are people that have gone on adventures, have fought things and done things. They're not just coming brand new into the world. And just from a player perspective, it's fun to be able to unlock the game a little bit more and allow my players to like enjoy some of the fruits that are given to them as the characters unlock. And level 3, similar to D&D, is just where things start to crack open a little bit more to keep that egg analogy going. Secondly, well, before I get onto that, Ellen,
Yeah.
can you talk to me about a little bit about what we have discussed in terms of do you want to talk about it now, or do you want to talk about it
Yeah,
in-game?
sure.
In terms of how we've played with the Android lore a little bit.
Yeah, because the Android lore, given that they've potentially lost a lot of their history due to the gap, but then also, being a kind of labor force, there's a kind of a lot of question marks over androids. But we know one thing about them is that their bodies, are kind of biomechanical, and that attracts a soul. They are living things with a soul. And once an android does not age, but around the end of a essentially normal-ish life cycle, they essentially choose to surrender their body to a new soul that will come in, not giving them eternal life, but essentially this kind of it's the end of an android's life cycle, similar to procreation.
Yeah, it's called renewal.
Yeah, renewal. Me kind of creating a character, thinking about sci-fi and how I like to use sci-fi to explore very human ideas, mainly about death. I thought, what if there was an android that was dying? Not this sense of renewal, but the idea that perhaps their soul and their body was somehow not going to make it, and how you would explore that in a sci-fi system where it seems like everything is possible, but the reality is some things are still finite. Some things still happen to you. Wonderful things may happen to you, but shitty things may also happen to you. Everything is possible. And that's kind of how I went about creating Ada. So they, interchangeable, has some sort of something wrong, essentially, with potentially their body and their soul, and the idea
we were saying that we were saying that it's kind of the fact that she can feel renewal actually happening.
Yes.
It's slow. Like, it's this idea of, I can feel this process slowly happening without my consent.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's that idea of slowly dying.
It's like
you can feel that,
seeping out.
the
Yes.
pull of the soul.
Yes, that it's a change happening upon her that is not something of her choosing, and it's not necessarily normal for an android. And there are many questions to be held about that. Many questions that I'm sure Ada has discussed with Clink being a bit of a medical kind of character.
So what we kind of decided to link our characters together a little bit is we're both from Absalom, and Ada's looking for answers, and Clink's a very curious mechanic. They would have been one of the first kind of people to have met out of the crew, and Clink is trying to help Ada understand her difference from the rest of the androids, and like what is strange about her, and where this difference comes from. And mechanically, what I did is I chose like an option for my character where I have technological medic. You can use your knowledge of machines and technology to repair androids and robots. Whenever you attempt a medicine check to assist an android, you can use your engineering skill instead. So that's a way of kind of like justifying that link between them, is that through studying Ada and trying to help her understand herself, he has gained a kind of knowledge of androids on a kind of medical level, on an intimate kind of technological systemic level. They've been sort of working on this problem for a year or two, or they haven't got very far because they haven't met each other very long, but I think they're the kind of first pair. Yeah. And then that drive is like, why don't we go out and look for answers? And get on our ship, we need more crew, and that's where the others come in.
Yeah. Are there links between the other two characters with anyone else in the ship? Or is there anything else that we want to talk about in terms of backstory or anything, or do you feel pretty happy with where we are?
No, other than to say that Zahak and Pinch are sort of along for the ride. They've got their own agenda, and they've got their own kind of like personal goals, but they're there to help, and they're there to be ostensibly a rogue and a cleric for the party, to be part of the ship, to go exploring and
make some credits.
Yeah. Make some credits.
Yeah.
Gotta get those
Absolutely.
credits,
See the
man.
stars.
I think it was kind of two couples that have come together as knowing each other beforehand.
Two duos,
Not couples,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know what I mean.
I was just clarifying.
Yeah.
I knew what you meant. But yeah.
Two duos coming
An
together.
android and a Shirin. I say.
Oh my
The scandal.
two duos kind of coming together in it for some adventure and some cash.
Yeah. And it's also worth noting, just as we're like heading towards the end, is that a big part of Starfinder, which will be incorporated into this season, spoiler, is Starship Combat. And Starship Combat is a massive game within Starfinder itself, even though obviously Starfinder does share a lot of DNA with D&D and with Pathfinder, and you'll note that in a lot of the mechanics. They incorporated Starship Combat, which is its own little mini game with rules, with rules and with rules and with rules. And that is something that we'll be looking to explore and have fun with. And in such, we have kind of loosely attached a starship role to each person on the ship in terms of where they would naturally sit. There are 5 roles generally within the ship itself, but I'll just get each of you just to quickly say what role we had talked about the 4 of you grabbing, and we'll see where that kind of plays out as in terms of the campaign. Let's actually go the other way.
Oh my.
Karma, where does Pinch kind of find himself?
Yeah, well, Pinch is actually an interesting one because he is technically the pilot, but is also the gunner. So depending on what's needed at any specific moment, kind of thing. But I would say gunner is his default position.
Yes.
That's where he likes to be down there with the, the turrets and everything like that. But is also keen to do some sick burns in space.
Nice.
Show off a bit.
A few donuts.
Evasive maneuvers.
Zahak.
Drift. Zahak Inanna Deva likes telling people what to do. So
Right.
he does take the captain role occasionally, but also he's not above getting on a gun and firing it
Yeah.
at ships. So typically he'll be found leering over someone trying to help, sometimes getting in the way, and then occasionally being put in the pilot's seat when there's nothing hard to do. But typically you'll find him on the guns.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see where, technically it's Clink's ship, but Clink does not a captain make necessarily, and so he seems
Does not have a good charisma score.
no. So it kind of just made sense for someone else to take the helm in that sense, so to speak. Speaking of Clink,
Yes, Clink, as a mechanic, he spends most of his time in engineering. So that's all to do with like boosting the shields, getting more oomph from the engine, improving maneuverability, that sort of thing. Yeah. He also has some piloting skills. He's flown the ship for a while. He built it, so he does know how to fly. But yeah, he's most happy when he is in the engine room. Him and Dex.
I love that. It's a fine looking ship I've made. Can't fly it.
Wish I could go anywhere in it.
I feel like there are definitely those people out there.
There's people with sports cars who cannot drive.
and shouldn't.
And Arda.
So being a technomancer and an android, most of my ability scores are kind of high in intelligence. So I figured it best for them to be in the kind of tech officer role, and they're the people when you see like a sci-fi film, they're the people just touching invisible screens.
Absolutely.
Oh no, Captain, they've got the Blogan tied, and better reroute the shields.
I need to
just a
change
lot
the
of
name of my thing now.
the Blogandine. Thank you. That's Ellen
the-
Graham
the,
original.
Trademarked.
The science officer in the Starfinder
Yes,
rulebook.
the science
Yeah.
officer. So, you can reroute shields. You can scan other approaching ships for weaknesses. Just kind of like your man behind the screen, essentially.
Yeah.
Sensors and all that good stuff. Yeah.
All I'm going to say as we wrap up is that as usual, as in most seasons of Roll to Cast, we kind of have a protagonist or someone that the story follows, and this is going to be an Arda story in terms of the protagonist. So that is the little teaser that I'll give the listeners at home or on your commute and what you can expect from this season. But that kind of wraps us up in terms of episode 0. We have our players, we have our story, we have our game, and all that stuff to really do.
characters.
Yeah, just
I
to
got some dice.
start. Yeah, you make sure you have dice, please.
Oh, damn. I forgot mine.
Yeah. But until next week, when we are going to crack on to Starfinder Among the Dust. Until that time, I have been Sean, your GM.
I've been Ellen playing Arda Prime.
I've been Phil. I'm playing Clink.
I'm Chris. I'm playing Zahak. I'm not going to go through the whole name.
And I'm Karma playing Pinch.
Hey, see you next week. You have been listening to Among the Dust, which is a Roll to Cast production. The best way to find us is on Twitter, Discord, and our Patreon. All our podcasts are on Acast, Spotify, YouTube, and all good podcatchers. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/roll to cast. Starfinder and all associated properties are trademark of Paizo Incorporated, authorized through Paizo's community use policy.
I think it will be Sean, actually.
Yeah, I think I will too.
This is Roll to Cast Season 8, Episode 0, Starfinder.